Officer Chad Johnson's eyes narrowed as he prepared to humiliate a traveler only. He had no idea she was an FBI assistant, director in the heart of Hartsfield. Jackson, a single smirk, was about to ignite a firestorm real-life stories knew. Brings you the raw moment when unchecked. Bias collides with unyielding authority. What happens when power is abused and a badge is no shield against the truth? Samantha Brown stepped into Hartsfield. Jackson with one mission, her flight to Washington, D.C. for a high-stakes FBI conference in a world where every second counts. There was no room for error. The terminal buzzed with hurried footsteps and sharp announcements, but then a glare. Officer Chad Johnson fixed his steely eyes on her calm, confident stride hit a wall as Chad's sneer cut through the hum of the crowd. "Ma'am, is this your bag?" He barked, his tone dripping with condescension. In that split second, tension ignited. What would you do if your identity was questioned in public? The scene seemed to ask. Samantha answered in measured tones, "Yes, officer." She replied, her voice cool despite the sting. She had faced injustice before. Today, however, the injustice wore a uniform and carried a badge. Chad's eyes darted over her state driver's license. His suspicion deepened. "Where are you headed?" he demanded. "Washington, D.C. work." She replied, simply no further explanation. She'd already flashed her idea check-in, yet his eyes are aimed, searching for something that wasn't there before she could process his next move. Chad stepped aside, signaling her to approach a cramped metal desk. The secondary screening area was dim and isolate, a stark contrast to the bustling main terminal. Samantha's pulse quickened as she followed him, every step laden with a weight of potential humiliation. At the desk, Chad's voice hardened. "I need to ask you a few questions about your travel plans." His tone was accusatory, dismissive of the order in which the day should unfold. Samantha kept her eyes steady. "I have official meetings at the J. Edgar Hoover building," she stated, her tone leaving no room for debate. Chad's jaw clenched. "Your FBI credentials don't look standard." He flipped her FBI credential case with a roughness that belied its official imper. Tance's hand hesitated, then placed the credential down as if it were a forgery. "Can you believe an officer would question a verified FBI agent?" The crowd of onlookers might have wondered. Samantha's CALM cracked just a bit, but she recovered quickly. "That is a standard FBI credential," she said. "You can verify it with the Bureau." The words were crisp, carrying the weight of authority and undeniable truth. Yet instead of immediate relief, her words only fueled Chad's disdain. He marched off to a nearby secure office with a final dismissive grunt. In a sterile back office, the phone rang. Chad's voice, laced with skepticism, barked orders into the receiver. "This is Officer Chad Johnson. I need to verify this FBI agent's credentials." His words were curt, lacking any trace of difference. The voice on the other end confirmed her identity. The tension in the room escalated. Chad's posture stiffened as the truth clashed with his pride, yet he refused to let go of his control. Meanwhile, Samantha sat alone at the desk, her eyes never leaving the ticking clock. Every second that passed was a second too long. The onlookers shifted, uncomfortably aware that this wasn't standard procedure. It was a power play. Sergeant Raleigh, an S who had been observing, silently stepped in with a low, almost apologetic tone. "Miss Brown, please bear with us," he said, his words a soft counterpoint to Chad's rigid authority. Time crawled as the verification call dragged on. Samantha's mind raced through every past incident of racial profiling, a history of unjust interrogations that she had long endured. But today she was not the victim, she was the force that would turn the tide. The seconds felt like minutes, and then the call ended. The FBI operator confirmed her credentials. Chad returned, his face a mask of forced Neutrality, we verified your stat. Us he said, though his tone held a lingering bitterness, but his words were not enough to dissipate the storm that had already taken hold. He ordered one final round of questions. I need to ask a few more questions about your travel, he insisted, his voice now mechanical, as if he were reciting lines from a script rather than enforcing protocol. Samantha's patience thinned. I've given you all the details. He said, her voice steady yet edged with iron. I'm late for a federal conference. Around them the crowd murmured, and a helpful traveler named Carla, accompanied by a Delta Airlines gate agent, stepped forward. R. Greg Mills, the inn showed. Samantha, her boarding pass, your flight is about to close, he reminded. The pressure was mounting. Chad's eyes flickered with a mix of frustration and unwillingness to yield. With a curt nod to his partner, Sergeant Rollins, he released her. Fine, you're clear to go. Miss Brown, he snapped. Samantha retrieved her belongings without a backward glance, her eyes burning with a promise. This wasn't over. The incident, however, had already set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of airport security at Hartsfield-Jackson. Back in Atlanta, the FBI quickly filed a formal complaint. The document was scathing unprofessional behavior, unwarranted delays, and the unmistakable smell of racial bias. It wasn't just a personal slight, it was a blatant abuse of power within D.I.'s. The complaint reached the top of airport management. Internal affairs swung into action. They pulled security footage, gathered witness testimonies, and compiled records of past incidents. Pattern Emmer Ged Chad Johnson had repeatedly targeted minority travelers. His actions were not isolated. They were the tip of a systemic problem. The investigation moved fast. An internal review panel was convened. The room was charged with tension as the panel presented the evidence. Witness statements were read aloud. Security footage painted a clear picture. Samantha Brown, calm and resolute versus an officer whose in-check prejudice had driven him to escalate the situation unnecessarily. The data was undeniable. Chad's history of targeting minority passengers was laid bare for all to see. Before the panel could render its final decision, a pivotal moment arrived as the evidence reached its peak of voice in the room. Asked, what would you do if faced with relentless prejudice from someone in power? That question OED in the minds of everyone present, challenging them to confront the reality of systemic bias. The climax was swift and brutal. The panel announced that Chad Johnson was to be terminated immediately. Our egregious misconduct. The decision was backed by overwhelming evidence of racial bias and abuse of power. His union representatives' protests fell on deaf ears. Chad was escorted out of the building, his badge confiscated, his career in ruins. But the fallout did not end there. The district attorney launched an external investigation into potential civil rights violations as the wheels of justice turned. Ned Chad's personal life crumbled. Background checks painted a damning portrait. Friends, colleagues, and even those who once admired his toughness distanced them. He was left isolated. His future bleak. In the aftermath, Hartsfield-Jackson made sweeping changes. New guidelines were introduced. Officers underwent rigorous training in bias recognition and de-escalation. Supervisors were mandated to justify why every secondary screening. A civilian oversight committee was established to monitor patterns of racial profiling. The transformation was not instant, but the message was clear. Abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. Samantha's resolve grew stronger. She channeled her experience into action. She began speaking at panels and leadership forums, recounting the events at the airport with unflinching honesty. Silence has its own blowback, she told an audience of aspiring law enforcement officers. We must speak up or let injustice fester. If you were in her shoes, would you accept injustice or fight B. Her words resonated deeply with those who had faced similar battles. Her testimony reached high levels of government at the FBI headquarters. Her superiors commended her courage. They promised to pursue the matter vigorously. Samantha's complaint was not just a personal grievance, it was a catalyst for change in boardrooms and behind closed doors. Discussions were ignited about reforming practices, rooting out prejudice in the coarse iders of power. The repercussions of that day at Hartsfield-Jackson were felt widely. Policies were rewritten, training programs were overhauled. The case became a touchstone for civil rights advocacy. In transportation security, every time a secondary screening was conducted, the memory of Samantha's confrontation served as a reminder. Respect and dignity were non-negotiable. Near the resolution of the investigation, as the airport community absorbed the magnitude of the transformation, one final question lingered in the air: what price are we willing to pay for justice in a system steeped in bias? It was a question that demanded reflection, a call to action for institutions and individuals alike. Samantha Brown's story was far from over. Even as she boarded her flight to D.C., her mind was already crafting plans for the next steps. Her experience had ignited a movement, a shift in how power was monitored and held accountable. The confrontation at the check-in was not just an isolated incident, it was the spark that lit a fire for systemic change. Every word she spoke, every testimony she gave carried the weight of countless others who had been silenced by discrim in Ation. And while Officer Chad Johnson's fall served as a grim reminder of what happens when prejudice goes unchecked, Samantha's unwavering resolve illuminated the path toward a more just future. Justice had prevailed, not with the roar of a crowd or the clamor of a protest, but with the quiet, relentless pursuit of truth. The legacy of that fateful day at Hartsfield Jackson was etched into policy, into practice, and most importantly, into the hearts of those who believed that no badge was above accountability. The change was palpable, and the message was clear: in a system where power meets prejudice, courage is the only weapon that can truly make a difference. Samantha stepped away, her silhouette framed by the fading terminal lights, as whispers of disbelief followed her. The confrontation and had reshaped more than a single moment. It had ignited change. Her quiet resolve, now tempered by raw injustice, spoke louder than any reprimand. In the aftermath, a discarded badge lay crumpled on the FL, or stark symbol of power undone. Has true justice been served, or is this only the spark that will ignite a revolution? Few believe the truth must be exposed. Share this story, and if you want to see powerful moments